line, any questions? Okay, Raya, do you want to introduce Elliott?
Okay, I'm very happy to introduce Elliott. Elliott is a really, really good friend of mine. I know Elliott because he wrote me an email out of the blue one day, which was about the fact that I'd contributed to a book that he'd edited and that he enjoyed. And from that moment of meeting each other, he came to London and said, could we meet? We have been huge friends. Elliott is an incredible person who's given huge amounts of time and generosity in his training and his work within solution focused. He's the only Black solution focused leader, something which we are actively trying to work towards changing. And he also started the Solution Focused University. He has the most amazing website full of brilliant videos about solution focus. If you want to know anything about solution focus, honestly, it's like a treasure trove in there. Elliott, I just welcome you, and I'm so grateful that you've also decided to give us some of your time and inspire some of our conversations today.
I don't know if can you guys all hear me?
Yeah.
Ryan, you should know that dedicating my time is not an issue. Like, I'm happy to do that. Dedicating my time at 7:30 in the morning is because I love Raya Ghul. So everybody know this is not my time in the morning. So anyway, asking me to talk for 10 minutes is a difficult thing. So I thought long and hard about, like, so what do I say? Like, how do I get like years of desire into 10 minutes? And I thought a lot about that. And I thought, since we're talking about actions that we can take, I realized that what I'd like to do is make 2 requests. In fact, I'm like begging for these 2 requests, to be very honest. These are not just requests. These are like passionate from my heart requests. There are many things that I'm very proud of about my professional work. And Raya talked about my website. I'm very proud of the work that I do in this field. I am not proud of being the only Black leader in the solution-focused field. I am not proud of being the only Black person in a social justice collective meeting like we're having here. I'm not proud of that. We have to do something about that. And I actually have 2 requests from the very bottom of my soul to help you guys get there. Now, the first request is, or to help this group, to help this community become different. And the first request is, I love solution-focused work. I actually think solution-focused work is the best approach to practice, because we ask people what outcome they want to achieve, and then we go about building language in a session to help that manifestation occur. I can't think of anything better than that. But I want to ask you guys a question. Like, how many of you, when you came into solution-focused and you got kind of introduced in the solution-focused community, maybe it was at a conference or maybe it was by a colleague or whatever, how many of you found this community to be incredibly warm and welcoming and filled with wonderful people? Like, raise your hand sitting in your seats if that's what you experienced. Perfect. I didn't. I experienced the solution-focused world as closed off, cold, exclusionary. I experienced it as a brick wall that I couldn't figure out how to get on the other side of. And what was really, really frustrating to me is almost everybody was like you. They were all saying, but I thought the solution-focused community was warm and inviting and positive and wonderful. But I was like, then why is it so different for me? And what I got very, very tired of very, very quickly is trying to defend my lived experience. So my first request, I think the world is changed with our ears. I think the world is changed when we listen to people's lived experience and we listen as if it's true for the person who is doing the talking. And I realize now that that is a really, really big challenge. Like, when you guys went into breakout groups, I hadn't seen Jonas in a while. I really like him. So I just decided I would just hang out and chat with Jonas. And I was telling him that, you know, living in Texas, it's just weird these days. And living in America, it's just weird these days. And there are some really wonderful changes happening. Like, in my 43 years of life, I'm not sure I've ever seen this kind of dialogue and this type of momentum moving towards change. And I think we mostly experience that as positive, but I want to give you an example of what I mean. We have to listen to people's lived experience and listen as if it's true for the person sharing their lived experience. Social media has made it very, very difficult for me because all of these wonderful changes that are happening in the world, I am being reminded as some of my white friends that I grew up with are responding really negatively and hurtfully to some of these changes happening. So just like everybody else, I go to social media and I'm looking for like cute cat videos, or I'm looking for like funny joke memes. And what I see is really hurtful responses from people that are very, very close to me. It's like grieving a living person. My high school English teacher spends a lot of time on social media sharing incredibly racist things. This person was like in charge of my education when I was 15 years old. And I look back and I realize how difficult of a time I had getting out of high school successfully. And I was going to school with people like that. That was in a place called Franklin, Massachusetts. And if I tell people what my life was like in Franklin, Massachusetts, I often get a bunch of people who currently live in Franklin, Massachusetts, telling me how wonderful Franklin was. And I'm sure it is wonderful for you guys who live there. But what you're doing is you're minimizing and invalidating my lived experience. And I genuinely believe the world is changed by the way we listen. Because this whole like Black Lives Matter movement and all that stuff, what it's really saying is like, listen, like validate us, value us and our experience. And we have to like train ourselves to not respond from our experience, but to respond as if the person who is speaking is telling their truth. And I now realize what I didn't realize before, that that is not easy. I got really, really tired of talking to people, and because I got really hurt when I would tell people what my experience was when I entered into the solution-focused community, and they would tell me that I was wrong. And I'm sure from their perspective, I was wrong, but they have to learn to listen that your lived experience does not match my lived experience. And that removes the ability for us to harm one another if we just listen as if someone is telling their truth from their experience. And it's so easy to experience hurt from the avalanche of collective voices, because there are 40-something people here. So if I said something that all 40 of you disagreed with, you guys would collectively bombard me, but that doesn't make my experience any less true. So my very first request, and I mean it, guys, like seriously, we have to train our brains to listen as if the person who is sharing their truth. And we have to validate that what they are saying is their truth. Does that make sense? Did I communicate that okay? Like, because I think we don't mean to do it. I think we have good intentions, but we have a weird way of taking personally what people say about things we enjoy instead of realizing they're just sharing their truth. I know that when we think about action steps, we think about like, where do we donate money? And like, where can we go donate our time? And where can we go volunteer? But I actually don't think that's how the world is changed. I think the world is changed by us taking action every single day and by allowing people who previously had not had voice to have voice. And the way we do that is by listening differently, not listening for them to explain themselves so that I get it, but listening very intently, knowing that because they're sharing their truth, I'm going to treat it as if it is their truth. And it really is that simple. My second request is when you see someone not listening, point it out. Like when you see someone invalidating someone's lived experience, when you see someone behaving in a blindly privileged way, when you see someone causing harm, even accidentally, point it out. Because one of the other hard things that myself and people like myself experience is, you know, when I was a kid, I remember studying slavery as a you know, maybe 12-year-old, whatever it was, in school. I remember studying slavery. And I thought every white person in America owned a slave. This is kind of what I thought, which is bad enough to think as a 12-year-old kid. I thought like every white person owned a slave. So I said something to my teacher about that, and my teacher said, no, that's not true. Only the wealthy own slaves, which was roughly about 25% of the population of the American South. And I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And I said to my teacher, what were the other 75% doing? And she said, staying silent. And I was like, whoa, like that's a big deal. That's when I learned that silence is just as harmful as action. So I know you guys have seen people do things and say things that you know is not right. And I know you guys have seen people do things and say things that you know is not right, and you didn't say anything. And that includes me, by the way. We don't speak up because I'm afraid to challenge the person in position of power, and I'm afraid to challenge the really successful, famous lecturer. I'm afraid to challenge the status quo. But what we're experiencing right now around the world is the status quo being challenged. And if we don't keep up, then this momentum does not keep up, because the status quo was not working. So I think it's really, really important that we don't be silent, that we give voice to change when we see it as necessary. And I recognize it is going to be hard. It is going to be uncomfortable, but it's also going to be the right thing to do. So my very true request, if you want to talk, if someone asks me, as I was asked, like to talk about actions we can take, I want you to really honestly listen differently when people from marginalized communities talk about their experiences, and when you see other people making blind mistakes, when you see other people causing cultural ruptures, when you see other people doing things unjust, to speak to it, to stand up to it, to educate them and let them know that this is not right and is causing harm. And when we can do that collectively, the world will never be the same. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Elliott. That was great and brilliantly good timing. You were like 10.5 minutes, so absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Ellie. Just like to say that the organisers, the hosts of the collective are asking everyone to donate to 2 charities that have been chosen by our speakers. The event today is free. That's a brilliant t-shirt. I'd love one. The event today is free, but if you could make a donation, we're going to put the details on the chat line. We're also going to email them to all of you when you have finished. So now we are kind of moving into the action space bit of the conference. What we're going